Football is becoming worse. That's the narrative amongst fans that's been growing in popularity every passing day. Not only fans, but amongst ex-players and coaches too. Ronaldo said he gets bored watching football and would rather watch tennis nowadays. Beilsa said players are losing what used to make them special. Even the greatest footballer to ever grace planet Earth has said it's changed for the worse recently. So what's going on? Is football doomed? Why is this narrative growing? Is this just old man yells at clouds energy? Or do they have a point? And do I personally agree with it? I'll cover that all in this video. There is one big notable change in top flight football that is leading to all of this anger amongst fans, and that's due to individuality no longer being prioritized. As time progresses, less and less footballers at the top level are encouraged to dribble the ball or to express themselves on the pitch. Football is undoubtedly much less about individual brilliance and more about collective team play and minimizing mistakes. Approaching football from an aspect of minimizing mistakes isn't exactly new though. That was Jose Mourinho's entire philosophy. He used to prioritize defensive football and waiting for other teams to make a mistake first. It was obviously very successful. He still holds the record for managing the team with the fewest goals allowed in a Premier League season, and he won major honors with this approach. But at that time, there wasn't much noise about this approach ruining football, and I think that's for a couple of reasons. One, a more pragmatic tactical approach was already kind of the norm at the time, outside a few managers. And two, Mourinho approached this less mistakes philosophy only by being inherently more defensive, but in attacking phases, he allowed his players' individual brilliance to take over, especially in transition. This is where the modern game starts to differ, and why the narrative is growing now, as opposed to back then. Check out this clip from Arsenal versus Chelsea in 2004. As Dan says, it's like watching a different sport. You never see players lumping the ball forward like that anymore. Now, they instead take a touch and pass short in order to try to not lose the ball and maximize their control of the match. Modern day football has tried to tinker and control exactly how players should score too. Euro 2024 only made this narrative grow because smaller nations were taking more long shots than ever. At one point in the tournament, 35% of goals scored were from long shots, and long shots are the antithesis of controlled football. Passing around teams until you can tap the ball into the net is the current priority of most big clubs. It's all about control. If you control more of the ball, control more phases of play, and control where you want the opposition to play the ball while you're pressing, the more likely you are to win, in theory. There's one person who became the face of this transition, for better or for worse. He's the one most closely associated with football becoming, quote, worse, and that's Pep Guardiola. Yes, the most successful manager in modern history is somehow also the person most people blame with, quote, ruining the game. But quickly, before we get to that, if you're enjoying this video, a like and subscribe could collectively change my life. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Football forever changed the year Pep went from managing Barcelona's B team to managing their first team in 2008. His influence, his success, his stature became so large during that time that many either have become convinced that this is the way to play or feel like they have no other choice if they want to compete against him at the top level. Having some of the best midfielders ever and the greatest player ever all in the same team meant Pep's new vision for structured, possession-based football could come to life. There was nothing but short passes and quick movements. Barcelona would pass the ball around any opponent with ease. You couldn't touch the ball, let alone score. It was amazing to watch, like a footballing symphony. At its best, that's what this playstyle looked and still looks like. 11 players seemingly sharing one brain, all so in touch with each other's off-the-ball positioning that they already know their next move before the opposing team can even react to their previous move. We can't forget how special these teams look when they're at their best. But everyone having heavily structured roles, even when they're not touching the ball, is where all the criticism lies. Zlatan Ibrahimovic is one of the best strikers of all time. He needs no intro or backstory, but during his time at Barcelona, he famously butted heads with Guardiola. Zlatan had elite instincts in the box. He knew where to be to expect a pass and score, but Pep started to ask more of him. Do more work off the ball, form triangles with midfielders and wing players on the touchline, all things that weren't part of Zlatan's bag. Pep's desire for control even resulted in some arguments off of the pitch too. This eventually led to Zlatan leaving Barcelona much earlier than expected, where he would go on to still have a very successful rest of his career. But this type of tension shown between Pep and Zlatan has become a reoccurring theme in Pep's career. Players that otherwise were individually brilliant would fall to the wayside if they didn't buy into his highly specific style of play. So Pep started to get the reputation of taking individually brilliant players and either not using them or turning the ones that bought in into just another clog in the machine. Jack Grealish, for example, an electric player at Aston Villa, famous for his gut-busting sprints and quick dribbles, now while at Man City playing under Pep, passes more than anything else and has lost virtually all of his self-expression in 2023-24. City won the treble the year before, so he's playing his role in the team well, but he seemed a shadow of himself last season and didn't even make the cut for the English national team, an unimaginable situation when he was bought for £100 million a few years ago. There are whispers the same is happening with Haaland now too, as he's never running in behind anymore and instead dropping deep to play passes. Honorable mention to Mahrez and Pep, always arguing with each other too. The silky Algerian baller always wanted more freedom than allowed, but there's no denying Pep improved him compared to his Leicester City days. He's another talented player who wanted to express himself, but unlike Zlatan, managed to stick around and be better for it. Of course, this style of play will have have some victims, but I think focusing solely on the talented players that have fallen to the wayside instead of the major success stories who have thrived in these systems is disingenuous. There's no doubting football has changed because of Pep Guardiola. We have far less individually brilliant players like Ronaldinho or Neymar, and far more talented players who perform a task well in a highly specific system. But there are more holes in this overarching narrative that blankets the entire sport of football. Carlo Ancelotti has won the Champions League twice in 3 years, and all he does is allow his players to express themselves. He shapes his team solely around allowing his best players to do what they do best. That's where the tactics versus vibes memes comes from. Compared to Pep, Ancelotti looks like he isn't doing much, when really he creates the platform for his brilliant players to show exactly why they're brilliant. If Haaland was on Real Madrid, I guarantee he would still be making runs from deep like he did during his time in Dortmund. Klopp at Liverpool focused on intense, fast, direct football, getting players up the pitch as fast as possible, and Thiago Motta, another example, the manager who just got Bologna back into the Champions League for the first time in 60 plus years and is now the new manager of Juventus, plays an exaggerated version of what Ancelotti does. Motta allows even his center backs to carry the ball all the way to the opposition team's box if they feel there's an opportunity to do so. Yes, the vast majority of managers prefer structure and control at the moment, but not everyone. Football is still very much a battleground of ideas, and any one of them have a fair shot at one day overtaking the current possession-based norm. And even if we do focus on possession-based managers like Arteta, he has created a young, entertaining juggernaut. It's not all just about boring passing with no self-expression. Just watch back Zinchenko in 2022-23 and Odegaard to see what they've been allowed to do in that team. As Arteta likes to say, it's his job to get his team into good attacking positions, the rest is on them. Their own individual brilliance must take over. In many ways, football is better than ever off of the pitch too. It's more accessible than ever. You can pretty much watch any top flight match in the world in more countries than ever, and international TV rights continue to boom. The average player is way faster, stronger, and smarter than ever. There's less lumping the ball around and more clean touches that turn into incredible passing sequences. The average fan gets to consume a way more diverse set of opinions and ideas through mediums such as this one. The soul of football still remains too, maybe more than any other sport, as the fans continue to fight off things like the Super League, as integrity to the footballing pyramid over guaranteed profits still means the world to fans. We have a lot to be grateful for and excited about in regards to the modern game. However, and this is a big however, football is getting much worse in a way that isn't part of the common conception at the moment, and that has to do with the financial trickery going on. Clubs are working night and day to try to find ways to bend financial rules, whether that's selling hotels to themselves in order to report more revenue generated so they're allowed to spend more, or having to sell future revenue for upfront cash so they avoid going bankrupt. The train is off the rails in this regard. Not to mention the Premier League club that has won 4 titles in a row is charged by the league they compete in for breaking 115 of their financial rules. Having to be bought by an entire country to compete is another thing. Football has gone so big, so rich, and so influential, now even governments have wanted to take part. And I believe that just skews competition far too much. No company or individual owner can compete with the resources or connections an entire country's investment fund has. Oh, our club needs a rich sponsor? No problem. We have direct connections and close ties to many. Also, as the fight for money continues to rage, the organizers, regulators, and leagues of the game are all fighting to introduce more games in an already packed calendar, all at the risk of player safety. More World Cup teams and matches because FIFA needs more of the pie. More Champions League group stages because UEFA needs a bigger cut too. This is an aspect of the game where without a shadow of a doubt, things have gotten much more complex and objectively worse off the pitch. But is football getting worse on the pitch in the ways the narrative suggests? In some ways, yes. But don't forget, in many ways, no. Do we need more Ronaldinhos? Yes. But ideas on the pitch still have an even playing field. New ideas can come and go and have a platform to try to take over. And even if this current norm has lost some of its unpredictable sparkle, it's more intense and precise than ever before.